So you want to get better at math, but you might be wondering how, or even what's the point? Well, have you seen this? What you're seeing is a study that explores the link between math and money. So if your math teacher told you that being good at math would be very important when you grow up, research tells us that your teacher wasn't just bluffing to get you to do your homework. It turns out, students who advance further in high school math have higher wages and are less likely to be unemployed, according to a 2013 study from the Cleveland Fed. This graph, which shows the pattern for students who graduated high school but didn't attend college, indicates that those with lower levels of math are more likely to be unemployed and earn less than those with higher levels of math. Granted, this is just one study from 2013, but here's another more recent study that may have you thinking twice about giving up on math. First, more numerate individuals had higher incomes. For every 1 point higher on the 8-item numeracy test, individuals reported $4,062 more in annual income, controlling for education and verbal intelligence. Quick disclaimer, it can't be said enough that correlation does not equal causation. Of course, you have to consider nuances since these results could be due to a number of factors, but it's an interesting relationship nonetheless. Now that we understand how math can impact our futures, if you want to get better at math or if you're a parent and want to help your child get better at math, I'll be covering 3 ways to level up your math skills. So today, here are my 3 tips to earn better grades in math, even if it's not your favorite subject. I hope you stick around and find some good nuggets. The first tip I'll share is about something called chunking. What is a chunk? A chunk is when smaller pieces of information are grouped together into larger units through meaning, into something called a chunk. If you think that sounds kind of abstract, there are many real-life examples that you can encounter daily. Picture this. Imagine that you're about to meet a friend, and you send your friend a text letting them know that you're getting ready and will be heading out soon. The concept of getting ready seems simple enough on the surface, right? You kind of have this big picture idea of what that means, but consider the individual series of steps involved when it comes to getting ready. Maybe you have to pick your outfit, maybe you have to toss your worn clothes in the laundry, put on your top, then your pants, then your socks. You get the drill. And yet we call all of this getting ready. So how do chunks help with math, and why should you care about chunking? Well, when you chunk ideas in math, you help your brain work smarter. Instead of looking at each tiny individual step of a math problem separately, chunking lets you zoom out, see the big picture, and then connect the dots. So the idea is that you're organizing your thoughts into neat little packages that you can actually understand, where steps are connected together rather than trying to memorize every single fact or formula as a disconnected unit. It's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle. Professor Barbara Oakley, author of A Mind for Numbers, compares learning a new math concept to putting together a jigsaw puzzle. If you just memorize facts or steps, it's like solving a tiny piece of the puzzle. You might get a narrow glimpse of what's going on, but you don't have context or a deeper understanding of how it fits in with other ideas. Now, when you chunk your thoughts, it's like most of the puzzle pieces are already in place, with just a few pieces missing here and there. The new logical whole makes the chunk easier to remember and also makes it easier to fit the chunk into the larger picture of what you are learning, writes Professor Oakley. But how do you form a chunk? First, you'll want to focus. Fully concentrate on the information you want to chunk. It won't work if you're looking at your phone or Netflix every few minutes. Second, understand the basic idea of what you're trying to chunk. Be careful though, there's a difference between understanding something in the moment and then being able to recall that information later. Having an aha moment of understanding doesn't necessarily mean that you can recall that chunk during, say, a test. That's why a lot of students can understand something when the teacher presents it in class, but then be totally lost on the exact same concept when preparing for a test, unless they've been reviewing and testing themselves. Third, gain context. Where the previous step was about the how the information comes together, this step is about the when to use the chunk. The goal is to see when your concept chunks should and should not be applied. Sort of like getting ready. It makes sense to get ready if you're about to meet a friend, but not necessarily if you're in the middle of doing dishes or eating dinner. So context matters. All right, so let's move on to tip number 2, which has to do with something called the testing effect. Quick story, in high school, my teachers would often volunteer me to peer mentor my classmates, which I'm glad that they did. In doing so, I became more and more invested in figuring out what someone could do if they were struggling with math, and more importantly, what would make the biggest impact. One of the highest yield epiphanies that I learned involves what's called the testing effect. You see, testing isn't just measuring what you know. As you test yourself, your brain is working. Neural patterns are strengthened and stabilized. So this dramatically improves your ability to retain material. What happens is this process actually adds to what you know. So something that you didn't know before gets added to your knowledge library by testing yourself. This knowledge boost due to testing is called the testing effect. As you do this, you'll ideally want to get feedback and check your answers using solution manuals, as well as help from your friends, tutors, teachers, or wherever you may find the answer. To take advantage of the testing effect, give yourself mini tests frequently. Actively practice recalling material, and you might be surprised at how much more prepared you are for your next real test. We are on a roll, so let's move on to tip number 3, which is all about avoiding overconfidence. Have you ever been in a situation where you were 100% certain of something and were later proven wrong? Well, the problem with being overconfident is you end up missing your blind spots, causing you to make errors that you wouldn't have made if you had taken precaution. Keep in mind that being confident is a good thing, but the goal is not to cross the line to being overconfident. This is a problem because the greatest gap between perceived and actual success is usually seen among individuals who usually perform at the lowest level. In other words, the students who show the highest levels of overconfidence are often the ones who achieve the lowest scores on tests and assignments. So this can actually affect a student beyond school. Consider, say, an overconfident student who grows up to become an overconfident investor. They're less likely to do enough homework and ask for help, so they perform poorly both in the classroom and in their financial decisions. So what can you do about overconfidence in math? First, check your work. Going through errors in homework, tests, and quizzes, and then understanding why you made those errors can help ensure that you aren't repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Next, explain the solution. Instead of assuming that you know something, take a second to check your knowledge by explaining the solution as if you were teaching it to a friend or maybe your dog. If you can explain your rationale for the steps confidently, that's a good sign. Finally, work with someone who isn't afraid to disagree. This builds on the last tip. You can work with a study buddy or a tutor, for example. The key factor is to work with someone who can pinpoint if something is wrong in your understanding and why it's wrong. And you do specifically want to work with someone who's okay to disagree. That's not to say that you want someone who will bash you, and you don't want to be the one bashing other people either. But when you're in study or work mode, corrections and constructive criticism should be welcome and even prioritized, rather than being overly concerned about hurting other people's feelings. So there you have it, some tips to help you get better at math. If you found today's video helpful or enjoyable, I hope you'll consider giving it a like or sharing it with a friend. Join the conversation by leaving a comment below, and if you'd like, feel free to subscribe to get the latest updates about my latest videos. Until next time.